From Pacifica, this is Democracy Now!
These are shocking and shameful comments from the President of the United States. I'm sorry, but there's no other word one can use but racist.
President Trump is facing international condemnation after using the word S-hole to describe African nations Haiti and El Salvador. But he used the full four-letter expletive before the word hole. During a private meeting on immigration, Trump questioned why the United States should accept more immigrants from what he described as S-hole countries rather than from places like Norway. We'll get response from the acclaimed Haitian novelist Edwidge Danticat. Then to Time's Up, the rallying cry that's bringing together women from Hollywood actresses to housekeepers to demand gender and racial justice in a world free of sexual harassment and assault.
I hope people see the momentum and the energy and the fact that we're uniting across all industries and all communities, standing together saying we all deserve workplaces where we're safe and where our work is valued and we can live and work with dignity.
We'll speak to Tarana Burke, the founder of the Me Too movement, actress Shailene Woodley, and leading Native American domestic worker and farm worker organizers, plus a prominent immigrant rights activist, is detained by ICE in New York. You'll get all the details. All that and more coming up. Welcome to Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, The War and Peace Report. I'm Amy Goodman. President Donald Trump sparked international outrage Thursday over a racist comment in which he said the U.S. should limit immigration from Haiti, El Salvador, and African nations in favor of countries with majority white populations. While meeting with lawmakers at the White House, Trump reportedly said, quote, "Why do we want all these people from Africa here? They're S-hole countries. We should have more people from Norway." Trump's latest racist comments came just after his administration announced it's ending temporary protected status for up to 250,000 Salvadorans who've been living in the U.S. since at least 2001. Last year, the Trump administration announced it's also ending temporary protected status for tens of thousands of Haitian, Nicaraguan, and Sudanese immigrants living in the U.S. The comments drew swift international condemnation. This is Haitian grassroots activist Renee Civil speaking from Port-au-Prince, Haiti.
Donald Trump is more than just a cancer on the world, and not just throughout the world, but particularly for the American people. He's a president who's destabilizing, a president of vulgar words who is unacceptable.
Trump's remarks prompted the New York Daily News to publish a banner headline on the front page featuring Trump's likeness superimposed of a cartoonish poop emoji with the headline S***T for brains. Trump spews vicious slur against immigrants, the headline. After headlines, we'll have more on President Trump's racist remarks. We'll go to Florida to speak with the acclaimed Haitian-American novelist Edwidge Danticat. The White House said Thursday it'll allow states to impose work requirement rules on many recipients of Medicaid, the federally run health care program. The move could force low-income people in at least 10 states to find employment or risk losing access to health care. The White House insists the change would only target so-called able-bodied adults and would not affect children or people with disabilities. The New York Times is reporting President Trump will again stop short of reimposing harsh sanctions on Iran over the country's nuclear industry, while imposing new sanctions over the country's ballistic missile program. The report comes as Trump faces a deadline today on whether to certify Iran as complying with a landmark 2015 nuclear deal. The deal was signed by a number of European countries, all of whom are urging President Trump to remain in the agreement. During the campaign, Trump repeatedly said he'd withdraw from the Iran nuclear agreement, calling it the worst deal ever. On Capitol Hill, the House of Representatives approved a bill Thursday to continue granting President Trump's administration sweeping powers to conduct foreign surveillance on U.S. soil.
The yeas are 256, the nays are 164. The bill is passed. Without objection, the motion to reconsider is laid on the table.
65 Democrats joined 191 Republicans in favor of the bill, which renews Section 702 of the Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Act, known as FISA. Among the bill's supporters were senior Democrats, including House Minority Leader Nancy Pelosi. Critics note the law allows the National Security Agency to collect personal communications of Americans without their knowledge or consent, as long as at least one party in the conversations is a foreign national. The dragnet means millions of U.S. citizens are affected. This is California Democratic Representative Ted Lieu.
Spying on foreigners without following the Constitution, that is okay. Spying on Americans without following the Constitution, that is not okay. The Fourth Amendment does not have an asterisk that says our intelligence agencies don't have to follow it.
During Thursday's debate, lawmakers rejected a privacy amendment that would have required officials to obtain warrants before accessing much of the NSA's collected data. Meanwhile, President Trump sowed confusion ahead of the vote, tweeting comments critical of FISA and saying it was used to, quote, so badly surveil and abuse the Trump campaign by the previous administration and others. Trump was referring to a discredited accusation Trump made last March that President Obama tapped his phone. Later on Thursday, Trump reversed course and tweeted his support after FISA reauthorization, and he got calls from Republicans. British authorities have rejected a bid to allow Julian Assange safe passage from the Ecuadorian embassy in London after Ecuador's foreign minister said he'd granted Assange citizenship. The move came as the minister said there were credible threats to Assange's life from third-party states. Assange first sought refuge and political asylum in the Ecuadorian embassy in 2012 when he faced possible extradition to Sweden amidst a sexual assault investigation that has since been dropped. Assange had always denied the allegations and calls the investigation a pretext for his ultimate extradition to the United States to face prosecution under the Espionage Act. In Hollywood, the studio behind the new film All the Money in the World is under fire, following reports it paid actor Mark Wahlberg 1,500 times more than the woman in its lead role, Michelle Williams, for a reshoot of several scenes. The reshoot came after director Ridley Scott chose to edit actor Spacey out of the nearly finished movie when more than a dozen men accused Spacey of sexual harassment and assault. After Scott cast Christopher Plummer in Spacey's role, actor Michelle Williams was given a per diem of $80 a day for the reshoot, which kept her away from her family over the Thanksgiving holiday. Her co-star, Mark Wahlberg, was paid $1.5 million for the reshoots in a supporting role. News of the pay disparity comes just days after more than 1,000 prominent actresses, writers and directors launched the Time's Up project aimed at combating sexual abuse and harassment in the film industry. We'll be speaking with some of them in After Headlines. In the Netherlands, U.S. Ambassador Pete Hoekstra was grilled by Dutch reporters Wednesday about past Islamophobic comments in which he blamed Islamic immigrants for setting fires and creating no-go zones across Holland. There are cars being burned. There are politicians that are being burned, Hoekstra said at a conservative forum in 2015. Last December, Hoekstra denied making the remarks, telling a Dutch television crew the reports were fake news. When Hoekstra was then shown footage in which he made the comments, he denied he'd even used the term fake news. On Wednesday in The Hague, Hoekstra spoke to Dutch reporters for the first time since he became U.S. ambassador, repeatedly refusing to answer questions about his false comments.
If you're truly an honest and wise man,
would you please take back the remark about burned politicians, or name the politician that was burned in the Netherlands?
Thank you.
Why don't you answer the question? Answer the question. This is not how this works, guys. Come on.
This is the Netherlands. You have to answer questions.
Ambassador Hoekstra is a co-founder of the House Tea Party caucus. When he was a congressman, he supports the death penalty, opposes abortion rights, and has spoken out against marriage equality and LGBTQ rights. In Pakistan, protests have erupted nationwide after the body of a 7-year-old girl was found raped and murdered in a district south of Lahore. Zainab Amin was last seen in surveillance camera video holding a man's hand as she walked near her home in the town of Kasur. Her body was later retrieved from a garbage dumpster. It was at least the 12th such incident in the district over the past year. On Wednesday, thousands joined a funeral for Zainab, protesting the failure of Pakistani authorities to stop the sexual assault and murder of children. In the occupied Palestinian territories, Israeli forces shot and killed 2 Palestinian teenagers Thursday as protests continue to rage over President Trump's declaration of Jerusalem as Israel's capital and over U.S. plans to move its embassy to Jerusalem. 16-year-old Amir Abu Masaid was shot dead at a protest near the Israeli border wall in the Gaza Strip. Meanwhile, another 16-year-old Omar Qaddous was shot and killed in the northern West Bank. The latest deaths came as Israeli officials gave final approval to plans plans for over 350 new homes in Jewish-only settlements in the West Bank, in defiance of international law and multiple UN resolutions. Meanwhile, here in the United States, the City Council of New Orleans, Louisiana, passed a resolution Thursday pledging New Orleans will avoid investing in or contracting with companies that violate human rights. The resolution was drafted by the New Orleans Palestinian Solidarity Committee. Its passage makes New Orleans the first city in the South and one of the largest U.S. cities to join the BDS movement to boycott, divest from, and sanction Israel over illegal settlements and over its treatment of Palestinians. In Los Angeles, transgender activists are planning a vigil of resistance this evening after a young trans-Latina woman from Honduras was found murdered Tuesday. People say they found the body of Vicky Gutierrez in a Pico Union District apartment and suspected foul play. She's the second transgender person killed so far in 2018. On January 5th, transgender rights advocate Krista Steele-Knudslin was found beaten and stabbed to death inside her home in North Adams, Massachusetts. Last year, at least 28 transgender people were murdered in the U.S., making it the deadliest year yet for the transgender community. Walmart said Thursday it's closing more than 60 Sam's Club stores nationwide and laying off thousands of workers. Many of the stores closed abruptly Thursday without any warning to employees. The layoffs came as Walmart said it would increase its company-wide minimum wage from $9 to $11 per hour. The retailer lauded the massive tax bill recently passed by Republicans and signed by President Trump, saying its tax savings would allow it to pass along about $300 million to pay for higher wages. That's a small fraction of the estimated $2 billion a year the company will save from the tax cuts, according to the United Food and Commercial Workers Union. At the White House, Press Secretary Sarah Huckabee Sanders and Treasury Secretary Steve Mnuchin both dodged questions about Walmart's layoffs while taking credit for the company's wage increases. President Trump is set to undergo the first medical exam since his inauguration. Today's physical at Walter Reed Medical Center outside Washington will not include a mental health screening, even though Medicare recipients over 65 are routinely screened during physicals for cognitive function and possible safety risks. Trump is 71 years old. He recently boasted of being a very stable genius amidst widespread reports over his declining mental health. In Puerto Rico, the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers has acknowledged armed federal agents entered a warehouse Saturday operated by PREPA, the Puerto Rican Electric Power Authority, where they seized a massive amount of rebuilding materials. A spokesperson for the Army Corps told The Intercept PREPA, quote, lacked transparency and inventory and accountability in its rebuilding operations, prompting federal officials to seize supplies and begin distributing them to contractors. About half of Puerto Ricans still have no electric power 114 days after Hurricane Maria made landfall, devastating the island. Meanwhile, hospitals around the U.S. are reporting acute shortages of IV drip bags just as the flu season reaches its peak after a major factory in Puerto Rico that produces the medical devices was badly damaged by the hurricane. In Peru, thousands of protesters marched through the streets of Lima Thursday, demanding that President Pedro Pablo Kuczynski step down for pardoning the country's former dictator, the convicted murderer Alberto Fujimori. At the time of his pardon on Christmas Eve, Fujimori had been imprisoned for crimes including ordering massacres by death squads in the 90s. This is protester Eliana Carlin.
Alberto Fujimori still has some trials pending. He has a trial in Pativilca, a place where he actually ordered to kill a group of farmers. And with the pardon that he just received, he's not going to respond for that crime. And we think that that's not justice.
President Trump has canceled plans for a state visit to Great Britain next month to open the new U.S. embassy in London as British civil society groups promised to organize massive protests against any visit by Trump. Secretary of State Rex Tillerson is expected to attend in the place of the president. In a Twitter post late Thursday, Trump falsely blamed President Obama for moving the U.S. embassy, tweeting, quote, "Reason I canceled my trip to London is that I'm not a big fan of the Obama administration having sold perhaps the best located and finest embassy in London for peanuts, only to build a new one in an off location for $1.2 billion. Bad deal. Wanted me to cut ribbon. No," was the tweet. In fact, it was President George W. Bush who ordered the embassy move in 2008. And the executive director of New York City's new Sanctuary Coalition has been detained by Immigration and Customs Enforcement. Ravi Ragbir is a nationally known immigrants' rights activist whose wife and daughter are U.S. citizens. Born in Trinidad and Tobago, Ravi had lived in the United States for 27 years, but faces deportation because of a 2002 wire fraud conviction for which he already served time in jail. Democracy Now! Has closely followed Ravi's case. He was on the show in March, the day of his last check-in, when he was told to return in January. Well, on Thursday morning, Ravi was taken into custody, sparking a peaceful protest that was met with police violence. Democracy Now!'s Renee Feltz was there.
At 26 Federal Plaza in downtown Manhattan, Ravi Ragbir met with ICE for his regular check-in. Outside, hundreds circled the building in a Jericho walk, some raising their hands to pray he'd come out. Ravi went in, accompanied by his lawyer and wife, and several city council members and state lawmakers. After nearly 2 hours, City Council Speaker Corey Johnson came out with an update.
Ravi had passed out, an ambulance had arrived.
Johnson said Ravi fainted when ICE agents told him he was being detained. Just as Johnson spoke, an ambulance pulled up that people believed was carrying Ravi in handcuffs on its way to an immigrant jail blocks away. New York police officers violently shoved people out of the way who were shouting support, some crying. As the ambulance drove down Broadway, City Council members Ydanis Rodriguez and Jomani Williams sat down to block its way and were violently handcuffed and marched away. At least 18 people were arrested. The police union later claimed the ambulance was headed to a hospital. Hundreds regrouped hours later for a vigil in front of the ICE jail on Varick Street, where Ravi was reportedly taken. Ravi's wife, Amy, joined in a Jericho walk around the jail, as she's often done with her husband in weekly vigils.
Ravi Ragbir is here with us in spirit, and he knows that we are going to win this fight, and that nobody is backing down,
ICE said late Thursday that Ravi had, quote, exhausted his petitions and appeals. Ravi's lawyer, Alina Das, disagreed and told Democracy Now! What happened when Ravi was told he was being deported.
Well, we went into the check-in with Ravi and his wife, Amy, and we were told by the immigration representative that they would be trying to enforce the deportation order and they would be taking him in. It was horrible news to receive. We had been in conversations with ICE for many years, and Ravi has been receiving stays of removal in recognition of both his community and family ties, his contributions as a leader, executive director of the new Sanctuary Coalition, and also in recognition of the legal challenges that we have filed that would actually have a chance of resolving his case and allowing him to stay here. They didn't allow me to accompany him as he left the building. They put handcuffs around him and they led him to a secure part of the facility and they escorted me out. So I have not been able to talk to him since that moment to reassure him that we continue to fight for him. But I believe that he knows what's happening here. This is the kind of community mobilization, the community support that he has certainly galvanized for other people who've been in similar situations over the years. And I think he would take great comfort in knowing that the community has rallied behind him.
Ravi Ragbir's lawyer, Alina Das. Thanks to Democracy Now!'s Renee Feltz and Nat Needham for that report. A federal court has now responded to an appeal Ravi's lawyers filed Thursday, setting a new hearing for January 29th and issuing a temporary stay of removal and a temporary order blocking Ravi Ragbir's transfer away from the New York region. This comes as ICE's online detainee locator system lists Ravi as being detained in Florida at the Chrome detention facility, and neither his family nor his lawyers know for sure where he's been taken. We'll continue to follow the case, and you can watch DemocracyNow.org for updates. This is Democracy Now! These are the headlines. DemocracyNow.org, The War and Peace Report. I'm Amy Goodman. Back after this break.
La vie a 7 ans pour yon moun kapoule. La vie a 7 ans pour yon chemin doré. La vie a 7 ans pour yon vent alisé. La vie a se salié. C'est un pour yon gros vent k'ap soufflé. C'est un pour yon chef au k'ap volé. C'est un pour moi pas gen sel pour moi voler. C'est comme ça la vie aille. Oh, 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 Chemin la vie c'est un coup un bateau qui dans désert qui sous la mer. Nous pas comprendre si la vie c'est un pont.
This is Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, The War and Peace Report. I'm Amy Goodman. International condemnation of Donald Trump is growing after reports the president used an expletive during a meeting about immigrants from Africa, Haiti, and El Salvador. While meeting with lawmakers, Trump reportedly said, "Why do we want all these people from Africa here? They're S-hole countries. We should have more people from Norway." Trump also reportedly said, "Why do we need more Haitians? Take them out." Earlier this morning, Trump wrote on Twitter, quote, "The language used by me at the DACA meeting was tough, but this was not the language used. What was really tough was the outlandish proposal made, a big setback for DACA." Trump's remarks come weeks after the New York Times reported Trump had also disparaged Haitians and Nigerians during a closed-door meeting in June, saying Nigerians would never, quote, "go back to their huts" if they came to the U.S. As for Haitians, Trump said, quote, "they all have AIDS." Trump's latest remarks come just after his administration announced it's ending temporary protected status for up to 250,000 Salvadorans who've been living in the U.S. since at least 2001. Last year, the Trump administration announced it also is ending temporary protected status for tens of thousands of Haitians, Nicaraguans, and Sudanese immigrants living in the U.S. Trump's S-hole remarks Thursday have been condemned across the globe. That's S-hole. We're not using the actual expletive that he used, 4 letters before the word whole. United Nations High Commissioner for Human Rights Rupert Colville decried Trump's remarks.
These are shocking and shameful comments from the President of the United States. I'm sorry, but there's no other word one can use but racist. You cannot dismiss entire countries and continents as whose entire populations, who are not white, are therefore not welcome. The positive comment on Norway makes the underlying sentiment very clear. And like the earlier comments made vilifying Mexicans and Muslims, the policy proposals targeting entire groups on grounds of nationality or religion, and the reluctance to clearly condemn the anti-Semitic and racist actions of the white supremacists in Charlottesville. All of these go against the universal values the world has been striving so hard to establish since World War II. And
in South Africa, Jesse Duarte of the African National Congress also criticized Trump.
This is not a country, neither is Haiti or any other country in distress. Obviously, we're in no position to stop any president from saying anything they wish to say, but all we can say is that developing countries do have difficulties. Those difficulties are not small matters, and it's not as if the United States doesn't have difficulties. There are millions of unemployed people in the US, millions of people who don't have healthcare services or access to education, and we would not deign to make comments as derogatory as that about any country that has any kind of socio-economic or other difficulties.
And in Haiti, longtime activist Renee Seville said Trump should be reminded of Haiti's history.
In the name of the Haitian people, we are part of a patriotic emergency that is fighting for real change in Haiti. We demand that Donald Trump apologize before the entire continent, as well as before Haiti, the country whose blood has been used by ancestors who have served with their minds and bodies to liberate the United States itself from slavery. Haiti is not it's a great country. It's the mother of liberty.
Trump's remarks prompted his hometown paper, the New York Daily News, to publish on its cover an illustration featuring Trump's likeness superimposed over a cartoonish poop emoji with the headline, "S for brains." Trump spews vicious slur against immigrants. We go now to Florida, where we're joined by the acclaimed Haitian-American novelist Edwidge Danticat. She is a novelist speaking to us from Orlando, Florida, author of a number of books, including The Farming of Bones, which won an American Book Award. She was born in Haiti, came to the United States when she was 12. We are speaking today to Edwidge, and on this day after Trump's S-hole comments, on the 8th anniversary of the devastating Haitian earthquake that killed as many as 300,000 people. Edwidge Danticat, welcome to Democracy Now! Your response to President Trump.
Well, thank you, Amy. My response to President Trump is total condemnation. It was a very racist remark, which shed light on earlier decisions that had been made by the administration, for example, about temporary protected status being eliminated for Haitians and Salvadorans, and his remark, as reported by the New York Times, about all Haitians having AIDS. It seems like once again Haiti is being used as a foil, and his baiting his bait and feeding them Haiti as red meat. And it's extremely sad that it happens also in the shadow of this day. Today was going to be an extraordinarily sad day for many of us anyway, who lost our family members, who lost our friends in this devastating earthquake. So this is even more salt on our wounds. Not surprising because of the nature of this presidency and the way this president conducts himself, but it is a terrible slight. It's completely racist, especially the way that he paralleled Haiti and Africa, which is a continent, not a country. Someone should tell him. And as describing them in this manner and contrasting them to Norway.
Seems to be redefining the term White House, where he lives in Washington, and what he wants to see in this country. Edwidge Danticat, we have been playing the responses of people around the world. From South Africa, one of those, as Donald Trump calls them, S-hole, but he uses the full expletive, though inexplicably this morning he's kind of denying this in a tweet. Though yesterday, when the White House was asked about this, they did not deny that he said this. I mean, there were so many Congress members in the room. What does it mean for Haitian-American families? Both the policy, what you're facing, the loss of what so many communities are facing, Haitian communities and Salvadoran, the loss of TPS, but also for your kids, when people hear these terms.
Well, that's exactly where I was going to go. Now there's so many Haitian children who will be going to school today, and inevitably it will come up, and then they will have to, their parents who are going to have to explain to their children why they don't, what the president has said and what kind of country they actually come from. In a country that, like Haiti, that has had difficulties, but that also the U.S. has played a hand in creating certain types of situations that has led to this, to the level of poverty that we have, which doesn't mean that we are not human beings, that we don't have dreams, that we're not trying very hard to keep our country going. So it's very disparaging.
Edwidge Danticat, what would you say if you were meeting with President Trump today at the White House?
I don't think I would be meeting with President Trump, but I would use this opportunity that you have given me to tell him to just stop it. Stop it. I mean, he's spewing white supremacist views that have real consequences in the lives of ordinary people. We already see it online, people who are jumping in and saying, of course, what he's saying is true. And then there are people who will act on it when they meet people like us. Who will exercise certain prejudices that affect the lives of the people he is talking about, but that also can lead to actual violence against our bodies, against our children. So I think he needs to realize that what he's saying, from the biggest bully pulpit in the whole world is affecting individual people. I don't know that he cares, because I think he's just feeling these things. And I think in part this was also, this is what he believes, but what he's saying from this very high position of power affects the future of nations, affect the lives of individuals, affect how policy is created. And now you have all these white supremacists and racists who feel so empowered because basically the president of the United States has put them on, has put a target on the backs of these people who he has described in this way, for them to be ridiculed, for them to have prejudices exercised against them, and in some cases to have violence, on assaults possible on their bodies, because these words give permission to certain kinds of people, and we become then hyper-visible in our vulnerability because we have been singled out, not once in the policy with the TPS, once with the AIDS, and now with this, and as a group of people, as Haitians, and as people here saying from Africa, and he's singling out people and making us targets for all kinds of possible attacks.
And finally, Edwidge, on this anniversary, this 8th anniversary of the earthquake in Haiti that killed up to 300,000 Haitians.
Yes. Well, today, this is what we would have been doing today, would be remembering and thinking about our dead and commemorating these losses. But sadly, this has been, muddled by this vicious attack by the president against our people at this time. So it is important. We were still going to remember. We are still going to mourn. But to use a saying that many people of different backgrounds have been saying since the election of the president, today we mourn, tomorrow we fight.
Edwidge Danticat, we want to thank you for being with us, Haitian-American novelist, speaking to us from Florida, author of a number of books, including The Farming of Bones, which won an American Book Award. This is Democracy Now!, democracynow.org. I'm Amy Goodman. As we turn to a growing chorus of women declaring time's up for many different reasons. Yes, that's the rallying cry bringing together women from Hollywood actresses to housekeepers to demand gender and racial justice in a world free of sexual harassment and assault. The movement launched Sunday night at the Golden Globe Awards, where the red carpet went dark, many dressed in black to show their solidarity with the movement. It wasn't just actors and actresses. A number of Hollywood stars brought social justice activists with them to the Golden Globes this year. Meryl Streep attended with Ajen Poo, director of the National Domestic Workers Alliance. Shailene Woodley was accompanied by Suquamish tribe member Kalina Lawrence. Emma Stone brought tennis champ, LGBT advocate Billie Jean King. Susan Sarandon brought media justice activist Rosa Clemente, and Amy Poehler's guest was Saru Jayaraman, president of Restaurant Opportunity Center. Emma Watson brought Marai Larasi, executive director of the British anti-violence group IMCON. Laura Dern attended with Monica Ramirez, president of National Farm Workers Women's Alliance, and Michelle Williams walked the red carpet with Me Too founder Tarana Burke. This is Michelle Williams, who was nominated for Best Actress in a Motion Picture Drama, speaking with Ryan Seacrest on the red carpet before the ceremony.
We're here because of Tarana. You might think that we're here because I was nominated for something, but that's really not the case. We're here because Tarana started a movement, and she planted a seed years ago, and it's grown on and caught fire. She started the Me Too movement. But really, the most exciting thing is I thought that I would have to raise my daughter to learn how to protect herself in a dangerous world, and I think because of the work that Tarana has done and the work that I'm learning how to do, we actually have the opportunity to hand our children a different world. So I am moved beyond measure to be standing next to this woman. I have tears in my eyes and a smile on my face.
That's Michelle Williams speaking on the red carpet Sunday night at the Golden Globes. It has since come out that, she is the star of All the Money in the World with Mark Wahlberg. And it came out that when they had to reshoot the movie because it was decided Kevin Spacey would be taken out since he has been accused of sexual assaulting boys and young men for decades, that the reshoot, for the reshoot, Michelle Williams got $1,000 and Mark Wahlberg got $1.5 million for that same reshoot. The activists who attended the Golden Globes wrote in a collective statement, "Many of us identify as survivors of sexual harassment, assault, and violence ourselves, and we believe we're nearing a tipping point in transforming the culture of violence in the countries where we live and work. We believe that people of all genders and ages should live free of violence against us, and we believe that women of color and women who have faced generations of exclusion, Indigenous, Black, Brown, and Asian women, farm workers and domestic workers, disabled women, undocumented and queer and trans women should be at the center of our solutions," unquote. Less than a week after it launched, the Time's Up Legal Defense Fund has already raised $16 million for legal support for people who've experienced sexual harassment in the workplace. Well, for more, we're joined by 5 of the incredible women who helped launch the Time's Up movement. We're all at the Golden Globes. Here in New York, Tarana Burke is with us, founder of the Me Too movement. She established the group in 2006 to focus on young women who have endured sexual abuse, assault, or exploitation. She herself a sexual assault survivor, now a senior director at Girls for Gender Equity. She walked the red carpet on Sunday night's Golden Globe Awards with actress Michelle Williams. She also, Tarana Burke, dropped the ball on New Year's Eve, but actually quite literally. She was the one who dropped that ball on New Year's Eve because of her prominence in this movement today. In Chicago, Ai-jen Poo, Executive Director of National Domestic Workers Alliance, is with us, co-director of Caring Across Generations. Her recent piece for Cosmopolitan headlined, "I was Meryl Streep's +1 at the Golden Globes." In Washington, D.C., Monica Ramirez, co-founder and president of National Farm Worker Women's Alliance. In Seattle, Washington, Kalina Lawrence, artist, activist, enrolled member of the Suquamish tribe. She attended Sunday's Golden Globes with actress Shailene Woodley, who is joining us now by Democracy Now! Video stream, the award-winning actress who starred in films including the Divergent series, Fault in Our Stars, and has appeared in the TV series Secret Life of the American Teenager. She was nominated for a Golden Globe for Big Little Lies, and we will talk about that as well. We want to welcome you all to Democracy Now! And as we have you all here to talk about Time's Up, Tarana, I want to begin with you. As you listen to the words that Donald Trump was reportedly used yesterday to describe people from Haiti, Africa, El Salvador, though he seems to be trying to take it back today, talking about people from, I won't say the actual word he used, it was S-hole, and that's the 4-letter word, hole. Your thoughts?
I mean, I want to say I'm surprised, but I'm not. You know, I think this is consistent with who we've seen as Donald Trump as a president, Donald Trump as an entrepreneur in New York. I think that his use of vile language in front of so many people might be surprising, but I'm not surprised. And really, you know, he named these 3 places, but it's clear to me that he means people of color in general, particularly contrasting it with having more immigrants from Norway. You know, I'm thinking about Ravi, who we talked about earlier on the show.
Ravi Ragbeer, who is the Trinidadian and Tobago immigrants' rights activist in the United States, has lived here for decades.
Right.
They arrested yesterday.
Yes.
2 city council members arrested, 18 people altogether arrested, hundreds of people here in New York trying to stop that arrest and deportation.
Those 2 things happening on the same day just are not, that's not lost on me. Like, this is somebody like Ravi being arrested who has worked tirelessly for immigration rights and on behalf of immigrants in New York and the United States, being arrested on a day, because it's indicative of what we are facing with this president.
Ai-jen Poo, you represent so many women in the United States as Executive Director of the National Domestic Workers Alliance. When you heard the comments of President Trump yesterday, calling people from countries outside Norway, like African countries, Haiti, El Salvador, and others, S-hole countries?
I mean, this is, I was not surprised, but I also want to say that this is not normal, and we cannot normalize this. This level of racism that is emboldening white supremacists all over the country to target people in our communities, people who work in our homes, caring for some of the most precious elements of our lives, our children, our aging parents. I mean, undocumented immigrants, the people that he is targeting are people who are so deeply embedded in the fabric of this country, people who are leaders in the community like Ravi, and they're being targeted, and people who are targeting them in an inhumane way are being emboldened in this moment, and we cannot normalize it.
Monica Ramirez, you walked the red carpet last Sunday. You are part of the Time's Up movement. You are co-founder and president of the National Farm Workers Alliance, representing so many Latinas and Latinos in the United States. Your response?
I agree. I mean, it's completely outrageous, and I think that it's more important than ever before that individuals like us who stand with immigrants, who stand against racism and hate, that we continue to use our voices to ensure that people who are being targeted know that we have their backs and that what is being said about them is wrong, that we don't agree with it. As Aijen said, it's not normal, and we're not going to accept it, because I think that unless we use our voices to speak out about this being hugely problematic and wrong, individuals are going to go farther into the shadows, and we have to do everything that we can to be supportive of those individuals who are feeling both othered and pressured and hated upon right now because of these kinds of remarks that are emboldening people who do seek to harm them.
I wanted to bring Kalina Lawrence into this conversation, the original people of this country, Native American of the Suquamish tribe. Yes, you were at the Golden Globes on Sunday. You representing Native American women in this country so often, and the victims of sexual assault when we talk about those issues. But as you listen to the president talking about immigrants from other countries, your thoughts?
Well, first of all, hi, Amy. It's so good to speak with you today. And one of the first things that comes to my mind is a lot of Native people in our country have engaged in what's called no bans on stolen land. It's just completely ironic that there's so much rhetoric around. I mean, it really doesn't make any sense to me. And I want to go back to what you were saying earlier, how there's no mental health section of his physical coming up, and I think that we should really find a way to make that a requirement.
That's very interesting, Kalina, what you're raising. President Trump, for the first time, going to Walter Reed for a medical exam, which is supposedly going to be made public. It is not clear if he'll have a mental exam, which many have been calling for, an extensive one. Yeah. The White House has suggested he won't, but even if he does, not clear it would be made public to people here.
Absolutely. And a lot of Native people have been standing in solidarity with all of those that he has directly targeted, and we recognize that, as many of these amazing women have said, we have not normalized this, we will not accept this, and we will do what we can to advocate across communities and use it as an opportunity to continue uniting.
And Shailene Woodley, before we go to a break and then talk about the whole Time's Up initiative, which includes racial and sexual harassment, your thoughts now outside of the United States as you continue to do your work. Today we're speaking to you in France. Can you talk about what you heard yesterday? Maybe you heard it when you woke up this morning. President Trump's term for people in Africa, in Haiti, in Salvador, and other places.
I did hear it when I woke up this morning, and I have to just echo what everyone else has said. It's completely unacceptable. There are no words that can appropriately describe how atrocious that comment is, and his overall narrative that he is sending out to not just our country, but to every country around the world. It is not the narrative of all Americans. It is not the narrative of most Americans. And I think it is important to continue using our voices to help elevate another narrative, which is that this will not be normalized, and that there is so much energy and work being done on the ground by so many different people, all of these women that we're talking to today, that are lifting other voices, that are shifting paradigms, that are supporting communities, that are standing up in the face of all adversities and saying, this might be the rhetoric that is occurring on the media, and this might be what our president is saying, but this is not the reality of our thoughts and our opinions, and this is what we're going to do about it, which is why I feel so honored to be here today, because these women that we're talking to are the women who are standing up and protecting and using their bodies and their voices and their souls to ensure that everyone in our country has a safe place to be and a place to belong, and that justice is seen despite the leadership of our current government.
We're going to break and come back to this discussion. That's Shailene Woodley, who was nominated for a Golden Globe for her role in the TV series Big Little Lies, where she plays an abused woman, as do other women in this TV series, not to mention one of the children. This is Democracy Now! We'll be back in a minute.
Think of the generations who will inherit this nation. Include them in our choices. It's our job to lift their voices. I gotta pay respect to the movement that is hip-hop, the people that create to express how that beat drop. The words of the silence telling stories for a cause. I'm thankful for the artists who stood up to spit how it was. I'm native and I'm peaceful, but I'm tripping like the voyage. Tired of the greed, deceit, destroying earth like we can make it without water or air. She ain't ours, we are hers, and we cannot compare. Our job is to preserve, though we don't deserve to remain. We can't contain our ego, don't live equal, need to reframe. Rich folks make systems of fear and hypocrisy while we subdue the margin of this so-called democracy. I'm native and I'm peaceful, standing rock hard like Dakota. North, south, bring east and west, we're gonna show up. Check your privilege and your comfort, your history and reflect. Don't confuse protect with protest, and instead use the platform for a cause.
Generations by our guest, Kalina Lawrence of the Suquamish tribe, speaking to us from Washington State. She was one of the people who was at the Golden Globes, one of the activists. Time's Up, that's the rallying cry that's bringing together women from Hollywood actresses to housekeepers to demand gender and racial justice in a world free of sexual harassment and assault. The movement launched Sunday night at the Golden Globes, where the red carpet went dark, many dressed in black to show their solidarity with the movement. A number of Hollywood stars brought social justice activists like Kalina Lawrence, who was brought to the Golden Globes by our other guest today, Shailene Woodley, who is up for a Golden Globe for Big Little Lies, a remarkable production of 5, to say the least, extremely strong women dealing with issues of sexual assault and abuse. Here in New York, Tarana Burke, she walked the red carpet, and she is really founder of the Me Too movement, established over 10 years ago to focus on girls and women enduring sexual abuse. Now Director of Girls for Gender Equity. Ai-jen Poo with us, Executive Director of the National Domestic Workers Alliance, co-director of Caring Cross Generations in Washington, D.C. Monica Ramirez, also at the Golden Globes, co-founder and president of the National Farm Workers Women's Alliance. So I wanted to go to Ai-jen Poo. Yes, you got a lot of attention as an activist at the Golden Globes, part of this Time's Up movement. What are you hoping will come out of this, from Hollywood actresses to domestic workers?
Well, one of the things that is so powerful about what was happening and what is happening is the incredible unity that we're seeing across diverse industries and communities, where women are coming forward, standing together to support all survivors, and then bringing forward all of these stories that we need to hear in order to find solutions that leave no one behind. Domestic workers, for example, have been left out, along with farm workers, and Monica will say more about that. But domestic workers have been excluded from some of the most basic protections that many of us take for granted. Everything from the right to overtime to the right to organize, and many anti-discrimination and harassment protections exclude domestic workers. And so we want to make sure that every single woman is protected and can live and work with safety and dignity. And what we're seeing in this moment is incredible momentum and incredible unity so that we can realize that goal.
Monica Ramirez, you represent the Farm Workers Alliance. You're speaking to us from D.C., deeply involved in the movement. Can you talk about what farm workers face?
Sure. Migrant farm worker women specifically are extremely vulnerable workers in our workforce. They make on average $11,000 a year compared to the $16,000 a year made by their male counterparts. Sexual violence against them in the workplace is widespread, with women reporting out at 80 to 90% in the few studies that have been done about the prevalence of sexual violence against them. It's so common that farm worker women refer to the fields as green motels and fields of panties. And we've been fighting against these issues as well as things like pesticides exposure and other kinds of safety issues that farm worker women and other farm workers face in our nation, because they too are excluded from major protections, and the protections that exist do not adequately address their needs because it is so difficult for farm workers to come forward given their reliance on the employer for transportation, for housing, and for other things, and given the extreme poverty that they're living in. And so we are proud to be working with our sisters here, participating in the show, and all of those who are part of the Time's Up campaign, because we know that together we'll be able to make a difference, and we'll be able to bring in those who are the most marginalized to those who are perceived to be the most powerful, so that we can make the changes that are required. Because farm worker women strongly believe that no matter what workplace you're working in, you deserve protections, and just like farm worker women do. And we're going to get there by working together.
If you could speak, Kalina Lawrence, about Native American women and what they face. When we talk about rates of sexual abuse, we must multiply this so many times when we talk about Native women, so vulnerable in this country.
Absolutely. The violence against Native women is 10 times the national rate. 4 out of 5 women experience violence, 4 out of 5 Native American women are on the receiving end of violence. I think 1 in 3 are exposed to domestic violence. And so one of the things that we definitely had time to share space about when we met as a collective group, actually right before the Globes, was that although we also experience this epidemic in the workplace, we experience it in our home, we experience it on college campuses, we experience it in the streets. This is an ongoing, obviously been ongoing since colonial invasion. It's been ongoing since the boarding school eras, where they stripped our children from families and abused them in religious boarding schools. Those things have been inherited. The patriarchal violence that we've been on the receiving end still very much exists today. And so there's a lot of work that's happening, not only around collecting these stories and this information, but really working in the community to shift our psychological approach to start to ask the uncomfortable questions and to hold more folks accountable as to what contributes to our dehumanization. And so Missing and Murdered Indigenous Women USA, Missing and Murdered Indigenous Women in Canada, there's so many different chapters of missing and murdered Indigenous women that are consistently working around the clock. One of the things that is really difficult, obviously, that as sovereign nations and government-to-government relationships, it's often difficult to really track the actual numbers because of the fact that most of the time convictions cannot happen on reservations if committed by non-Native violators, and vice versa. A lot of times when Native women are violated off of the reservation, their traumas, their experiences never see investigation, and they rarely have attained justice, right? So it's an incredible necessity to be included in the conversation and say that we have been doing this work for essentially 500 years, and we'll continue to do this work in solidarity with those who now share this you know, what is now the United States, but they share this land with us, and we're really honored to offer the resources and the tactics that we have used to women who are doing the same work in their respective communities.
Shailene Woodley, you took Kalina to the Golden Globe. She was your +1. Can you talk about that movement and also the Time's Up movement overall, specifically, concretely? So far, the fund apparently has raised $16 million for people to be represented who've experienced sexual and, I assume, racial abuse, as you talk about sexual harassment and racial injustice.
Yeah, so Kalina and I have been fortunate enough to be friends for a couple of years now and work together through on a few different movements. And when I first found out about Time's Up, I have to admit I was not one of the founders in the entertainment industry. I wasn't a part of the group of women who came together originally to create Time's Up. I joined the movement later on, so I just wanted to make that clear. But when I first read about it and I received the invite of empowerment to bring someone or to wear black and sort of got the download on what everyone was aiming for with the Golden Globes, I realized that in their messaging, almost every single minority group was mentioned amongst women except for Native American women and except for Indigenous women. And that is a common theme that we see constantly. I am not Native, but it is something that I recognize as, you know, we saw Standing Rock last year, and we saw a lot of people begin to pay attention to Native Americans and Indigenous people overall. And then that's kind of waned, and people haven't been including that community in movements overall. So Kalina was the first person I called, and I said, hey, I have a +1. Or actually, I was just like, what are you doing on January 7th? And she's like, I'm free, I'm in, whatever it is, let's go. And, and
And what was it like to join? I mean, you traverse these worlds, Shailene. You were at Standing Rock. You work a lot with activists, and you are an A-list actress in Hollywood. What was it like to bring these worlds together with these activists, together with the actresses, together with the activists?
It was gorgeous. I was very emotional. It was the first time in my life that I had gone to an award show, and when I looked in people's eyes, I saw nothing but authenticity and nothing but a genuine desire to learn more and a genuine desire to use our platforms for a purpose that is far larger than just our own lives. What was also beautiful about what happened on Sunday at the Golden Globes was that as much as we were spreading the message of the Time's Up movement and spreading the message of solidarity, it was not a disrespectful movement. It wasn't disrespectful to all of the other actors and artists who were there, who were being praised for their artistry. But there was an awareness and a mindfulness about the bigger picture that I haven't personally seen in this industry before on this level. And being someone who does traverse both worlds, we all have our strengths and we all have our weaknesses and we all have very different gifts. But to me, for all of us, if we come together and we unify, which is the underlying message of what we've been talking about, then those strengths and those weaknesses will be balanced out, and we'll be able to do so much more because our voices will be that much louder.
We have 10 seconds. Tarana Burke, from dropping the ball at New Year's Eve in New York to the Golden Globes, your final comment, and then we're going to go into a part 2 discussion and post it online.
Yeah, I agree with Shailene. I think that this was an amazing moment for us, and I think it symbolizes what's to come.
We have to leave it there. I'll be speaking in Basalt, Colorado tonight at the Temporary. I'm Amy Goodman. Thanks so much for joining us.